Hi, and welcome to this episode of the Brave Educator podcast. I'm your host, Rob Harsh.
And I'm Tracy Chen.
And today we're going to talk about student voice and choice in the classroom and what that entails, what that looks like and sounds like. So, what do you think? How's your week been? I got to ask you that first.
The week has been good. It's been a little crazy.
Yeah.
It's almost May in a high school, so you can imagine. Seniors are, chomping at the bit, getting ready for graduation.
Oh, I bet.
Everyone else is trying to cram in their last-minute research and literary projects and things like that. So it's an exciting time, getting ready for state testing, but it's a little chaotic.
Oh, we have started state testing.
Oh, and how's it going?
It's good. I mean, I don't get to see some classes in the afternoon, their schedule because they're testing. So I'm helping with, student support, things around the school, planning, extra planning time. It's been kind of nice, but it'll be nice when it's done and we can get back to making. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we'll see.
Well, hopefully the making has inspired them to do well on their test and has taught them some skills that they need to do well on the test.
Yeah, hopefully that grit and just sticking with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
the positive attitude that even if they don't know the answer or that whole failure, that it's okay if they don't know the right answer, just keep pushing through.
Absolutely.
Well, student voice is one of my most challenging things because it's really a fine line to invite student voice, right? And ask for student voice, but at the same time maintain an environment that is conducive to learning and that it also isn't just letting the kids run the show and take over. And so it's really kind of challenging. As a librarian, I think it's easier than a classroom teacher, but at the same time I think it's challenging to kind of find that place where students have a voice and they feel ownership, but you still have some, semblance of control.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's definitely a weakness of mine. So I already have some kind of goals for next year. One thing I really want to do is start a student advocacy group. It's kind of like a leaders of library, not necessarily a club. I mean, we've done that, in the past with some of our amazing students, but more just kind of an advisory council that kind of helps me kind of when I'm coming up with things like, does the library have to be closed at lunch this week, or new materials, what would they like to see in the makerspace? Just kind of all things is really start like an advisory group that meets regularly. So I have some more, that's just one of my goals, but in a bigger context, giving students choice and voice in the classroom. I got this book this couple weeks ago. It's called We Got This by Cornelius Minor. He is an educator out of Brooklyn, New York.
And then I bought it.
Of course.
You sent me a picture through a text, and I thought, wow, that title is great.
Yes, so it's Equity, Access, and the Quest to be who our students need us to be.
Yeah.
And I found myself reading this book and, saying, yes, oh my gosh, this is so awesome. This is exactly. But it has some really great ideas for classroom teachers about how to shift that mindset and giving, the locus of control a lot more onto the student, which totally ties into TPEP in Vancouver here.
Yeah.
Our teachers are evaluated on TPEP, and part of that component is, students having control and
classroom
student voice.
Management, yeah.
Yeah,
the norms.
Right.
Norms, yeah.
And so this book has so many great and kind of positive affirmations and ideas, but also even things like it's got a blueprint for shifting your mindset. It has some really great kind of powerful things, but one thing that really stood out to me that I wanted to talk to you about today is...
I'm only in the chapter 1, so is this a spoiler?
No.
Okay.
It's not a spoiler, but I think it's going to kind of invite some conversations.
Okay.
So, and hopefully people that are listening, it is inviting conversations that you're having with your colleagues, whether you're a teacher or a specialist or a principal. Sure. If you're in education, this is a conversation I think is really kind of
and the resources that Tracy's going to share are amazing. The 3 books. We have these. They're absolutely must-haves if you are thinking of trying to increase student voice and choice in your classroom, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So here's 2 things actually.
Okay.
So, but sometimes kids feel like what we are teaching is not for them. So, right?
Yeah.
Really powerful. And I see that every day.
Oh, yeah.
Kids feel like what we are teaching is not for them. So thinking about everything that we do, like curriculum, projects, assignments, books we're requiring them to read, sometimes, and I see it a lot, is kids feel like what we're teaching is not to them. It doesn't mean that they're not compliant, and it doesn't mean that they don't complete the work, but sometimes they don't see the correlation. And,
it's just hoop jumping, hurdle jumping.
Well, and a learning target is so important and so incredible. Don't get me wrong, but a learning target sometimes is more for the teacher than it is for the students, in my opinion.
Okay.
So sometimes I
always tried to frame my targets so that if a kid came up to me and said, "Why are we learning this? What's the importance?"
They could answer
Not that they did, but some would, a couple. Mm-hmm. Then I could say, "Here's the reason why, and here's how this is going to apply to another facet in your life, or how can you apply it later in learning or life, So you were trying to take these targets and make them engaging so that the learning would be engaging, but did that ever happen,
That's hard. But here's the big one. Ready?
Okay.
Learning is inherently social.
Yeah.
And sometimes the way that we run our classrooms is not. Okay, so this is from the book. We got this by Cornelius Minor. So learning is inherently social, and sometimes the way that we run our classrooms is not. So where have we always been in that point where if kids are talking or a classroom is loud or a library is loud, that it just means that the teacher is letting them have fun and real learning isn't happening? Because I got to be honest. Obviously, I talk a lot. Right? Yeah. I was the child. I'm a product of Vancouver Public Schools, and I think on every single report card, one teacher or someone put, talks too much in class. And granted, my talking maybe wasn't always, around the context of what we were learning. But that being said, and I'm guilty of this. We see a teacher, we see students, we see a classroom, and it's loud, and the kids are laughing or they're up and moving,
and they're talking. There's no work going on.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Or you think that there's no learning. Because honestly, they may not be doing the task at hand, right?
Yeah.
They may not be completing the quote-unquote work. But learning is happening, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, going back to what you just said just reminds me of when I was back in the classroom, the middle school classroom, and we had just got these iPads, right? And you remember that year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I thought, well, my gosh, this is such a great learning tool. I want to use it to their advantage. And so giving students the option to submit either an essay or to do maybe a 5-minute Puppet Pal video that shows the exact same learning, but just a different platform,
right. Yeah.
But was I really giving students the voice and the choice there? What do you think? Like giving them options?
That's one thing that he talks about in the book, is that like one of the ideas is to give kids options and choices, but to also ask, like, are we even asking them?
No, I didn't ask them. In fact, I was basically giving them, here's your choices.
Right.
These, and that's not really what it's about, is it? Don't you think? What do you think?
No, I think it's about finding students' passion.
Yeah.
And then harnessing it. Right. And making, we all have standards to teach, right? I think
it's the key is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's taking their interest and wrapping the standards around that.
Yes.
But how do you do that? That's such a...
So he talks about that in this book too, about bending the curriculum. So, right? So bending it to meet where the kids are. So, right? So thinking differently about how, because we think curriculum, we think standards, it's got to look this way. But really... and we were talking on the phone the other day about your student that you're working with, about talking about taking an idea. This student is passionate about space, right?
And aquatic life.
Oh, and aquatic life. A scientist, a budding scientist. And finding a way for that student to show that they're proficient in, whether it be a writing prompt or, right? But in different ways, how do we get there?
Yeah. Oh, I know. It's such a challenge. I mean... I've even thought where we can take the standards and just rewrite them in super uber kid friendly language.
Okay.
So that they could go through and almost like a checklist, like, oh, I want to hit this one, I need to hit this one, and I can do this all through this project or this assignment, by doing a multimedia presentation or whatever. But how can we take the standards and wrap it around what they want to do? And still...
Because it's scary.
Yeah.
It's totally scary.
But it's something that if I go back to the regular gen ed classroom, I will totally try that. Totally try it.
So okay,
It
so
might bomb, and it probably will bomb miserably because it's me. But
what gives you the courage to do it, to try it?
because it's about the students, I think. I mean, I look, and I've said this before in one of our lost episodes that will never hit the airwaves. But I think I view myself as kind of like a concierge to the kids. You know, don't you think?
Yeah.
And, you know, it's my job the minute they come in to say, how can I help you today? What would you like to, you know, that's what we should try and get to.
I think you're a librarian.
No.
Because
Maybe.
that's basically what a librarian is.
Yeah. But like, how can I best help you make this engaging? And does it look like kids are working on different things throughout the day? You know, do you still have that prescribed, this is math time, this is reading art, language arts time, you know? Or is it kind of a...
Every kid's doing their own thing?
Exactly, yeah.
Well, and how do we get there? See, that's just it. Like, I don't know. I mean, is it something where it's so radical that it's like a completely different type of school?
Well, I think what John Spencer recommends in Empower, show that, hold that up so they can see it. No, that's Launch.
Oh.
There you go.
Same author, different
same
book.
author. Same kind of, you know, look to the covers there, but Empower.
So Empower is by John Spencer and A.J. Giuliani.
Yep, A.J. Giuliani. And it's basically about how to increase student voice and choice in your classroom and really put the ownership on them. And, you know, when you think about that, you know, I have kids coming up to me in the makerspace quite often saying, Mr. Harsh, I need help. Or, you know, it's the way that they ask, Mr. Harsh. And I'm going, okay, this kid needs help. You know, and saying, well, I want you to solve it. Man, that ticks them off. You can just tell that they're upset by, well, figure it out. I want you to figure that out.
That's hard.
It's hard because we been setting them up like this?
Well, and
you know?
I think too, like the whole idea of being social, like when I have a problem, right?
Yeah.
I don't sit at my desk by myself and struggle through the problem.
Yeah.
I maybe do it for a few minutes, but then I go and I find a resource to help me, whether it be on the web or a book, but 9 times out of 10, it's a person.
Yeah.
So I'm asking, you know, my instructional coach partner, you know, Kelsey, or I'm asking my clerk, Kathy, or I'm asking our tech, you know, support, Seth or Bobby. I'm asking one of them to kind of help, or I'm asking a colleague, a teacher,
Sure.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that, but we don't offer that same permission for kids.
Mm-hmm.
We expect them to work in isolation and in quiet. And that whole idea of it being social is, how do we get, it's just something I struggle with.
But I said this in the last episode here that I'd went to a conference over in Evergreen District, and the one of the keynote speakers was a gentleman he was an evangelist from Google, and he was talking about.
I love that. Okay, first of all, I love that they call themselves like chief evangelist or evangelist. I think that's just
they have them.
Awesome. I know.
Yeah.
It's like our made up terms. Remember when we made up our own job titles when we went to Virginia?
That's not made up. That's a thing.
So Rob and I had the opportunity to go to Virginia.
Segue.
Virginia to a Maker Ed conference, and it was incredible. It was part of Digital Promise, and we met all these people from all over the country who are struggling every day like we are, trying to give students voice and choice and integrate making, and classroom teachers, librarians, tech people, all different people. Anyways, we had this amazing opportunity. We went with Bobby and Wayne, 2 other educators from Vancouver.
Yep.
And all the other districts had like a principal or a superintendent or somebody that, you know, was important with them.
Yeah.
And because of scheduling and because of some conflicts, and it was late notice, it was just the 4 of us that went. So we really had no supervision, which I'm not sure if that was the best idea.
Yeah, it was
but we had a great time.
The city's still standing.
Yeah,
It's
we
fine.
maybe got stuck at an airport.
Yep.
But we had a great time. But we made up fake job titles. And so we took it a step further and made fake name tags. Office Max, you can actually
were a
order
hit.
name tags. So we walk into this Maker Ed conference, and we all had fake job titles, and they looked legit.
Yeah,
I mean,
they
they did
were.
look legit. I mean, they were Office Max or whatever. But so Rob's job title was, well, here you can.
I was Deputy Paradigm Shifter.
Yeah. And I was the provisional thought leader.
Oh yeah, what was Wayne?
Wayne was the interim interim integration
specialist.
No, interim innovation integration specialist.
Oh yeah, it was.
Yeah. And then Bobby was like they were all like temporary terms. Bobby was the, like provisional, interim, deputy. None of us were official, but we wore these name tags into this maker conference, and people thought they were, first of all, they didn't really know how to take us.
No.
And then when they realized that they were a joke, then it kind of took off. So.
Yeah, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun.
So hey, getting back to that book.
Yeah.
We Got This.
Yes.
Like I said, I read the preface, and I'm just into the first chapter, like literally second page of the first chapter. But there was something that he said, and I want to share this with everybody. He had said, if we want to nurture students who will grow into lifelong learners, into self-directed seekers, into the kind of adults we are morally responsible, or who are morally responsible, even when someone is not looking, then we need to give them opportunities to practice making choices and reflecting on the outcomes. And just reading that makes me think of a couple teachers I work with at Ogden. In fact, I'm gonna call him out. John Fedorovich, who also is a listener of ours, and he sat with me and gave me some ideas for our show, which I totally appreciated. I took notes, because hey, we want to grow with this podcast. And so, John, I appreciate the notes, but John is one of those teachers that is kind of that warm demander. He's going to push his students and, kind of expect a lot from them, but also he knows when to kind of rein it back and be very nurturing with them. I've seen it in the makerspace. And so it's teachers like that I think, and I don't want to pigeonhole, those him. But I think it's teachers like that, those warm demanders, those teachers that really understand that we need to, I think, be like that with our kids, that we need to expect them to rise to the occasion, I think would do really well with this type of modality, don't you think?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, too, that people typically that are teachers like that are always trying to seek out their own professional learning. And so people like that are wanting to get better. And anybody that's wanting to get better and is doing the work to get better.
Or listening to our amazing show.
Well.
Yeah. But, one of the things that John recommends in Empower, so you read through the book, and toward the tail end, he gives practical steps for
yes, I have them
how
here.
to share a couple.
Okay, so start with one project, right? If you're a classroom teacher or a librarian or a maker teacher and you have, 40 projects that you do in a year or 25 assignments in a semester, start with one thing. You don't have to introduce this amazing, student voice in every single thing that you do. Start with one project. And honestly, being that it's May, springtime, it's a great time to start a project, I think, especially something that's a little bit different. Or the other thing is get your hands on some resources. This is my copy. If you're in Vancouver, I'll loan you my copy. But read these and kind of set yourself up for success for next year, so you can kind of set yourself up with some ideas of how to build community, how to make all students feel valued and have those high expectations for all students, and by letting them all have a part in that. Okay, so John Spencer and AJ Giuliani, they say, start with one project, collaborate with a trusted colleague.
Makes sense, yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Once again, we're doing that social learning,
bouncing ideas off one another. Yeah.
I love this. Do a choice audit of your classroom.
Okay.
So, Cornelius Miner talks about something similar in his book too. So, what are you doing for students that they can do on their own? Oh. I'm so guilty of this. I know this about myself. I'm the mom, I'm the one that just, you come in with a problem and I just want to fix it and, pat you on the back and give you a big hug and then send you on your way. So I'm guilty of that.
Okay.
What am I doing for students they can do on their own?
Yeah.
What systems can be changed to be more flexible?
Okay.
Right? So thinking about that.
Absolutely. Systems,
flexible. Number 4, rethink the standards. Can you integrate choice? We talked a little bit about that. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Number 5, communicate with stakeholders. Share with leaders, students, parents. Talk to your principal. Say, hey, I'm trying to get more student voice. Here are some ideas I have for the beginning of the year. Here are some things I want to do with my classroom culture. Here are some materials I'm hoping to teach next year. they're on the approved list, but I'm hoping to integrate some more diverse voices in my lessons.
And if you can get, I think, if you can share with those stakeholders, right? And your principal comes in and sees you doing this and working diligently at getting better, that's just going to reflect when you are evaluated, don't you think? I mean, you have the opportunity to really kind of advance your
Absolutely. And when you're sharing with your students and their parents, and you're saying, I want all students in here to meet this goal.
Yeah.
And we're going to look at it differently this year. How are we going to get all these kids to this goal? And it might look different, and it might sound different. And I want you to be ready for it. I think, right? It's hard to argue when you know ahead of time and you're communicating constantly.
Sure.
Number 6 is model it.
Yeah.
Which I love. You and we both love that whole concept of failing in front of people, is okay.
Sure.
So model some choice, in your own, presentations and things like that, and model risk taking and model, all those things, collaboration, everything.
Yeah.
And then the final one is my favorite: take the leap.
Yeah.
Just go for it, right?
Yep.
And there's all different kinds of things we've talked about in our previous episodes about all different kinds of tools out there that really help amplify student voice. So we've talked about Flipgrid. I love Flipgrid. If you've not checked that out, check that out. It's an app. You can also use it on a Chromebook or a computer. But students can record basically a video snippet.
And they can also do it without the audio or video.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And they can preview it.
If they don't want to.
And listen to it before they present it to the class. There's other things like Padlet, where
Padlet's great.
in Padlet,
that.
it's basically like a digital corkboard where students can submit work, and that way they're kind of presenting and publishing to a bigger audience.
Yeah.
I just saw this new thing called Flip Snack. Have you ever heard of Flip Snack?
No, just now.
Okay, so I know they all have kind of catchy names, all these ed tech things. So,
what is it?
So my friend Craig, who's a librarian up in Seattle Public Schools, he shared with me it's a publishing format. So students had collaborated with some adults in their district and made a zine, right? So
Sure.
an electronic magazine. Yep. And they used Flip Snack to
Stack or snack?
Flip Snack.
Oh, okay.
And it's got different versions. It's got a free version and then different paid versions. Okay. Just the thought of kids being able to publish their own zines, and then have those available for other students to read, like in a library or things like that.
That's cool. Yeah.
Right? So it was really great. And then in our app catalog in Vancouver, there is an app that's called Comic Life 3. And so today I had an amazing, wonderful IAC student who came over, was so proud that he had made a comic book in this app. And so they were working on narrative writing. So he wrote the storyline and imported some pictures, and the app automatically converts the pictures so that they look like their comic book. I don't know what that kind of font picture-y,
Oh, gotcha.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's awesome. And you choose the layout, so you can choose how many cells you have on a page.
Okay.
It's incredible. So we took it a step further. We were thinking about like a wonder project, which they talk about in these books, right? Where you take a kid and you say, what are something you're interested about and you want to learn more about,
okay,
right?
like a passion project.
Yes.
Okay. All
okay.
Right.
So a student in Miss Young's class is obsessed with space, like knows everything about the planets, kind of like your student, right? We went in and did some vocabulary with the students on space and things like that. Anyway, talk about making a comic book, sharing all of his knowledge. Right?
That's awesome.
So
and it's not an essay; it's narrative writing, but
it's writing.
The format is different.
He's got research because he's got to put in where he's getting his information from.
Sure.
He's going to do some images, and he's learning about copyright because he's learning which images he can use from Creative Commons. That you can't just use anybody's picture. Like
there's quite a bit of learning going on.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. And the students this particular student is super excited.
Great.
And it's an amazing product.
Yeah.
So just be thinking outside the box. When you think of like student voice, right? Mm-hmm. A zine would be cool.
Oh, yeah.
And
that's creating rather than consuming, pushing worksheets at the kids.
Right.
They are getting to actually create the content. And in Spencer's book, Empower, there's a great kind of a T-chart that shows the creation versus consumption. Mm-hmm. And how little our kids are creating.
Yes.
In video, and it's just ridiculous.
Well, even in creating, when I think of creating, I think, okay, I'm not an artist, right? I'm not going to
But
draw a
we
picture.
are, yeah.
But it could be writing. It could be speaking. It could be video.
Yep.
It could be. There's so many different types of being
Could
creative.
be performing.
Right.
Performance art.
That we think that I think of create, and I think automatically I think like painting, which is a struggle for me.
Yeah. So one thing that I want to talk about is the difference between an engaged classroom and an empowered classroom. And this comes from John's book as well.
Yes, because engaged doesn't necessarily... Engaged sometimes just means compliant.
Well, reading that...
It doesn't always mean... Truly engaged means they're excited and they want to learn.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that's what he's kind of sharing is like the whole... Yeah, so share those two.
Yeah. So in an engaged classroom, John and AJ say that you are attentive and committed to the curriculum, right? The teachers are. But in an empowered classroom, you are attentive and committed to the student's interest. So it's not looking at the scope and sequence of your book, but looking at your standards and how can we wrap those around what their interests are, right?
Yeah. And here are all these resources. Come and find them that match those interests.
Yeah. In an engaged classroom, you are preparing students for their future, but in an empowered classroom, we are preparing them for anything. And I feel like we're doing that in that makerspace, that we are really kind of preparing them for anything. We're focusing on the grit and the perseverance. We're focusing on that collaboration, the problem solving, that critical thinking.
The failing.
Yeah,
it's not the end of the world when something fails. Yeah.
Big time. In an engaged classroom, teachers are working to make it interesting, but in that empowered classroom, you are working on tapping into their interests. Which again, I love that.
We actually, it's almost like you're making them do the work. Yeah,
you must learn in an engaged classroom versus what do you want to learn in an empowered. And that goes back to that concierge. What would you like to learn? How can I help you today? What do you want to
Yeah, and I think we can still make sure kids learn everything they need to learn. You just find a way to make it so that it fits what they're interested in.
You make sure it fits with their interest, and where's the critical thinking component coming? How are they going to show us that what they've learned is not only it's engaging to them, but where was that critical thinking going on, right? Yeah, that's important. I think
so too.
In an engaged classroom, we give choice, but in an empowered classroom, you can inspire the possibilities. I love that.
I do too.
In an engaged classroom, you take an assessment versus assessing your own learning. What do you think?
Ooh,
I like that. I mean, how often do we let kids assess their own learning?
Well, how often do we as adults?
Oh, I'm constantly.
But a lot of us aren't.
I'm beat myself up.
I know, because you call usually and say I had a horrible day or I need to know.
It's just I am always wanting to make sure that when kids come through the door of the makerspace that what they are doing is engaging.
But that's why you're an incredible teacher.
Well, thank you. But I struggle. Like when they leave, was that really what?
Well, it sounds like you need to go do a choice audit.
I do need
I'm kidding.
Choice audit.
I'm kidding.
But then in an engaged classroom, he has that consuming versus in
creating.
An empowered classroom, you're creating. And what does that look like? In an empowered classroom, what does the creation look like? Are kids making with their, making? What?
Are they right?
I don't know. And then in the last one, an engaged classroom, differentiated instruction, and an empowered, it is personalized learning. But then that just connects in with that passion project.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Absolutely.
If you're doing that personal, or that, if they are wanting to learn about aquatic life or the solar system, right? Then that's personalized for them. They're going to find everything they can about that subject.
Well, it's kind of funny because this obviously we're out of time, but this is our passion project if you really think about it.
Yeah.
This podcast, this professional learning, this whole idea of
absolutely
learning as much as we can about putting kids first and finding ways to connect with students is kind of our passion project. So that's probably why we spend so much time on it. Absolutely.
In fact, I wish we had another hour to talk about this and
we can next episode.
Hash it out. We can. I thought our next episode we could talk about culturally responsive teaching. I think it connects with this.
I think so too.
Absolutely.
Okay. And maybe
just like everything else.
Yeah. And maybe some plans for how to close out the school year.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's do that.
With a bang?
Sure.
All right. Well, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
This is the Brave Educator Podcast.
All right. Take care.